So we haven't gotten the platinum yet, but the second these credits finish, I'm not exactly sure when it's going to happen. The trophy's going to pop for one more time, which is New Game Plus, and Power and Responsibility, which is hardest difficulty. I played the DLC and New Game Plus on the hardest difficulty, so I basically played the entire game, DLC and all, on the hardest difficulty. Mostly because I was afraid to change it because I thought it would void the trophy. After that, there's one thing left, and that is to pay our respects to Uncle Ben. At that point, the platinum pops and 100% pops. I thought it better than having a platinum pop than do the DLC later on. I thought it was best to do it this way. So we're gonna talk about it. Okay. If you want to know about the platinum, I'll just tell you. In the army, we have this phrase called bottom line up front. Don't tell me how you got there, just tell me the so what. Here's the so what. Go for this platinum, and go for the 100%, and do it on the harder difficulties. I'm going to tell you why. This game can basically be broken down into four sections. Traversal, stealth, combat, and the MJ and Miles sections. You know, the boring ones, the ones I don't really care for. The ones with very limited gameplay and are only there as pace breakers and to extend the length of the main campaign. Stealth is alright. Stealth is passable. It's underdeveloped, which it's fine, I think. You move super fast. You can take out enemies very quickly. Enemies are very slow to become aware of your presence. Which is probably why you can't completely stealth bases. So the way bases work is that you defeat a certain amount of enemies and more enemies come out, and they call them waves. So once you defeat one wave of enemies via stealth, they all just know where you are, because otherwise you could just stealth everything, because the stealth is kind of overpowered. The stealth isn't that fun. The traversal and combat are absolutely amazing. Traversal may be the most fun movement I've ever experienced in a game. The only times I can think of having this much fun just moving in a game, probably Super Mario 64 the first time I played it. Super Mario 64 was an absolute joy to just move Mario around in this like 3D space, and it felt so right. It felt so right the way he moved and the weight and how high he jumped and all that stuff. It just felt so good. I'm referring to my notes right now. I wrote down Doom 2016. I like Doom because I've played a ton of FPSs where you move like so slow and you just stay in one place and just shoot. And Doom 2016 is like, no, you have to keep moving. It's all designed around movement. And just like this game, the movement is super fast-paced and creative. You're able to express a particular style. Stanley, rest in peace. Hey, where was I? All right. The traversal. I love that just moving has a skill associated with it. I also love that the game encourages you to swing to as many places as possible, and here's why. If you just fast travel everywhere, you're probably not going to encounter too many crimes. Crimes are needed for the crime tokens, which are required to level up the suits and the gadgets and stuff like that, and they give you decent XP, and they're just fun. And it's kind of what Spider-Man would do. He would definitely stop crimes as he's like swinging through the city. So although you still have fast travel available, like you don't have to swing everywhere, like swing from one side of Manhattan to the other, you're kind of encouraged to do so. Every trophy guide you'll read will say, don't use fast travel, or use it very sparingly, because otherwise you won't be able to rack up the crimes that just randomly spawn around the city. And you're also, there's so many collectibles and so many things to do in New York City that you're never too far away from something. Either whether it's a research station or a Black Cat outpost, or you're always close to something. So like straight up, you might forget there's a fast travel, and the game will probably be better for it. I only wish you would swing just a little faster. Maybe a mode in the game where there's no fast travel at all, but you web swing 50% faster. Oh, that's interesting. Anyway, let's talk about the combat. So the combat at first seems very shallow. there's really not too many combos. There's a lot of things you can do once you've like punched an enemy and like, you know, you can kind of like do with them what you want. Like there's not too many combos. There's essentially like an aerial combo and there's like a regular combo. And once they're in the air, you can like aerial combo them, you can slam them back down, or you can web swing them into a wall or something like that. Where it gets really interesting is where you start to add the gadgets into it. You start to add webbing into it, or the web bombs, or the suspension matrices. Like if you really stop and look at everything you have and everything you could do to deal with enemies, it's a lot. Like it's a lot. But the game doesn't throw much at you during the story mode. Now, I'm coming from the position, the first time I went through the story, I played on Spectacular, which is the hardest difficulty you can play on a new game. Once I beat that, I did a New Game Plus on Ultimate, which is the hardest difficulty, period. And I want to say a difficulty was added after the game came out. It was basically built for New Game Plus. It was built with the idea that you would already have all your gadgets and your assets and your upgraded health and all that other stuff. Honestly, Ultimate difficulty is really not that much harder than Spectacular. Especially, it's not so much your stats, it's how well versed you are in the combat. It's how well seasoned you are that you know what you can like combo into. You know what to do if you get surrounded. You know what to do when enemies are near a vehicle. You know what to do when enemies are near a wall. The leveling up doesn't matter that much, except for like the skills. Like once you're fully leveled up, you might not be any stronger, like in terms of like how many hits it takes to take an enemy out, and you don't really have that much health, but like you're gonna be so accustomed to the combat and used to what you can do, and what enemies you can use what moves on, that that's way more valuable than any just like avatar strength, basically. There's this idea in when I say avatar strength, what I mean is this. There's this idea in video games where, let's say you play an RPG, and the gameplay at the beginning of the game is you just hit attack and you attack. Gameplay at the end of the game is you hit attack and you attack. You're obviously a lot stronger, but the actual like skill involved with playing the game has not really increased. Maybe you have to plan better. Maybe you spend time grinding to get better armor, but the actual like skill applied to combat has not changed during the entire course of the game. But to make you think you're better, the numbers have just gone up. It's avatar strength. Like you're not doing anything different. It's just the numbers have gotten higher. So you're like, oh, okay, cool. What this game does is it basically gives you the illusion of avatar strength. It works the opposite way. Whenever you level up, you get like 10 more HP. 10 HP means fuck all. It means almost nothing. Or maybe you do like 5% more melee damage. Doesn't really mean anything. It doesn't. Gadgets are way better anyway. like beating enemies isn't like the best way to take them out. It just isn't. What matters a lot more is the gadget level and how much gadgets you can hold. As you play the game, you're going to level up. But what's more important is that you become accustomed to the combat and figure out what you can and can't do. Like that's how you get better at the game. The level up guide is just there for flavor, basically. It's and this combat system is amazing. This is one of the best combat systems I've ever played in a game. I'd say it's almost better than the Arkham games. Fuck it, I'll say it is better than the Arkham games. It's way faster. There's way more self-expression. There's way more style involved. Unlike the Arkham games, you can fight in like multi-levels. Like you can go in between like stealth and combat, and like there's ways to kind of like, you know, marry those two. In the Arkham games, they might as well be separated on both sides of a gate, and the gate is made of chainsaws and tigers. Like they're so separated. They're like completely just like, and there's no way to turn a stealth section into a combat section. Well, you kind of can, but it's very, very cumbersome. In Spider-Man, that's not a problem at all. Any stealth section can quickly become a combat section, and it doesn't completely fall apart. It's really good combat. But what sucks is that the game, like the main game, the story mode, doesn't really take advantage of it. It doesn't really throw that much at you. If you're just playing the story mode and you're not playing like the bases and you're not playing the crimes, the most enemies thrown at you is probably the section before Mr. Negative, where you have to fight the Sable agents. I think there's like 4 or 5 jetpack guys that attack you. If you have a full focus bar, you can just instant take them down, and that's it. If you don't, you shoot a trip mine at them. A trip mine will instantly take them down. All you have to do is just aim and fire. And sometimes you don't even really have to aim. But one gadget will take down those jetpack guys, which are probably the toughest enemies in the game, if you let them. If you let those jet guys come in, right? There's like 3 jetpack guys standing right there. If you don't do anything, or if you attack other people, if you let them, they will wreck your shit. But if you take them out quickly, it's really no problem. And before you know it, you're like, that's it. Now, this problem with the combat, that it's like so good, but the game doesn't really push you to learn it, is kind of rectified in the DLC. The DLC, the DLC, the DLC will throw jetpack guys at you, along with brutes, along with whip guys, along with other brutes, along with more jetpack guys, along with like 15 other dudes. Like and those 15 other dudes are all wearing armor and they take twice as many hits. Like the DLC is just has zero chill whatsoever. The DLC will throw more at you in the first 5 minutes than the main game does the entire time. If you're trying to 100% the DLC, good luck. I hope you're not playing on the hardest difficulty. It was a legit challenge. I mean, it wasn't like pull your hair out super frustrating, but it did take a few tries to like get it down. And you could be doing really well, but let's say you just missed a perfect dodge, or you weren't paying attention and you let 3 jetpack enemies spawn in and just didn't do anything with them, and now they're all doing their attacks at the same time. You might have a problem, and you might not be able to get out of it, because there's also 5 dudes shooting you with RPGs. The DLC is where this combat really shines. And I was looking up forum posts about this, and a lot of people were talking shit about the DLC. A lot of people were saying the DLC is just too hard and it's cheap. And it's only because the DLC requires a lot more from you when it comes to the combat than the main game. And I fucking loved it. I kind of wish the main game was more like that. I kind of wish they would throw like 2 whip guys at you at the same time. They never do. The whip guys are always separated by like waves of enemies. Like, it's extremely rare they'll throw 2 whip guys at you, but you can take out 2 whip guys very easily. Suspension Matrix and Web Trip. Boom. I wish they threw more at you. The DLC kind of figured this out. Like, the DLC is like, okay, now we're going to up the difficulty a bit. We're going to throw more enemies at you. But the main game is just like, well, we'll take it easy. We'll take it easy. I kind of wish the hardest difficulties added more enemies in there, or they added like... Bottom line, combat's really, really good, but you may not realize that until you play on the harder difficulties. Alright, that was a long time to spend on the combat. Next I had air combos and perfect dodge will get you through basically everything. Yeah, in the main game, air combos and perfect dodge will get you through basically everything. Maybe not the jetpack guys, maybe not the brutes, but like that's it. Everything else, like... almost every enemy in the game that's on the ground, if you web strike, triangle, and hit circle, and hit them, or hold down triangle to like give them a air combo, it's gonna take them out, almost all of them. There's some enemies that are holding melee enemies, and or melee weapons, and if you web strike them and try to attack them, they'll like counter. But if you dodge under them, they kind of like get off. You know, they're like tripping over themselves, or kind of like off balance, and then you can mess them up. So whenever you're web striking, always do that. Always web strike and then dodge under, and the enemy is going to be taken off its feet. It works for like every enemy. The only enemy in the entire game that punishes that is the minigun brutes in the DLC. I feel like Insomniac kind of realizes that the main game is too easy and a lot of strategies are too good. So they made an enemy that specifically punishes web strike. Took them a while, but anyway. Next I have written, gadget combos are not really introduced or required to take on many foes in story mode. Yeah, the first time I was playing, I completely forgot I had gadgets. I had to like keep reminding myself to use gadgets. And I didn't realize how good gadgets were until I went to DLC, which basically requires gadgets. If you're trying to get through the DLC without gadgets, god damn, good luck. You're a better man than me. I don't know if I would have it in me to try to get through the DLC 100% on the hardest difficulty without using any gadgets. Maybe if there's a really cool trophy involved. I think that might be more than what I'm willing to try. The gadgets are really, really strong. A lot of people talk shit about the gadgets. Like a lot of trophy guides I've read say like only upgrade your gadgets the minimum number of times. They're not even that useful, and they're not that useful in the main game, but in the DLC you need them. Next, I have written. I think I've already talked about this. DLC is amazing. So many enemies thrown at the player. They must learn gadget combos and how to take down specific enemies. Playing through DLC on ultimate difficulty made me master the combat. Yeah, yeah. The game's not going to give it to you on the hardest difficulty on the DLC. The game will make you work for it. There's some boss fights that were a real challenge in the DLC. Like I'm trying to figure out the best way to fight them, and it seems almost everything I do they can counter, and it's like shit. Like Silver Sable, the one-on-one fight with Silver Sable, it changes how the game works because she can counter some of your attacks, and you need to like count the number of times you hit her, because if you hit her one too many times, it's almost like an old school Kingdom Hearts 2 boss. If you combo too many times, they'll just instantly counter and shut you down. So you need to like can't get too greedy in terms of damage, and you almost gotta like count the amount of damage you're doing in your head because you can't just combo forever. It's a bit easier in Spider-Man because you only have like a 4 or 5 hit combo, whereas in Kingdom Hearts you can customize your combo. So that's kind of the gameplay. I absolutely adore the gameplay. I I really want to see what this game does, what Miles Morales does, because I hear that there's only 4 gadgets, um, but they really develop the combat more, and I'm hoping they throw more at you. I don't think they do. It's kind of hard to tell how hard the Spider-Man game is because when you look at like trophy guides, you can complete Spider-Man on the easiest difficulty, and on the easiest difficulty, you can't die. So it's so a lot of trophy guides recommend to play on the easiest difficulty, but it's like, man, I don't want to play a difficulty where I can't even die. Like, there's no, it's just a tedious thing at that point. Like, there's no satisfaction to be gained at all. So it's really hard to get an idea of how hard the game is on the hardest difficulty because almost everyone either plays on normal or plays on the easiest difficulty when they go for like trophies. Miles Morales is a 2 out of 10. Spider-Man is a 3 out of 10 on the easiest difficulty. And I don't know how it's not a 1 out of 10 if you can't die. Like, you're really only limited by your patience at that point if you just can't die. Um, so let's talk about the story. So here's what I have written. The best story I've seen in a PlayStation exclusive. I'm trying to think of all the PlayStation exclusives out there. It's probably the best PlayStation exclusive story in like the PS4, Xbox One, Wii U generation of consoles. I think it's better than God of War. It's better than God of War. Um, there's better writing. There's better characterization. It's better than Uncharted. Better than Horizon, definitely. It's not overwritten like over Horizon, like Horizon. There's enough story there to really satisfy and no more. Like they knew when to call it quits. They're like that's it. We don't want to slow down the game. Like that's all the story we're gonna have. You know, I don't think there's any cutscene that lasts longer than 5 minutes. And most of the story is revealed through people calling you. And when people call you, you're swinging around the city, you're like doing other things, and the game doesn't stop you from like hearing something. You'll encounter a crime, you'll do whatever, and then Spider-Man will be like, "Oh, I'm sorry, what were you saying?" "Yeah, MJ," and MJ's like, "We have to stop these demons. They're destroying the city, blah blah." Everything's explained. Everything is eventually revealed. Like the context of everything is eventually revealed. It's good. It's a satisfying story. I don't know how much I want to spoil it, so I'm going to kind of leave it at that. Um, I will say this: the story is cliched, it is somewhat predictable, but it's done very well. So I know next to nothing about Spider-Man. I know absolutely next to nothing. I've seen like the movies. I'm a huge fucking normie when it comes to Spider-Man. I don't think I've ever read a single comic. Like it, I barely know who the Scarlet Spider is. Like I barely know who Ben Riley is. So I'm pretty like shallow when it comes to the Spider-Man lore. And as soon as Peter Parker's working with Otto Octavius, like, okay, I know where this is going. You know, like they're not gonna have Otto Octavius in the game and not have Doc Ock, you know. So I'm just waiting for him to turn into Doc Ock. And as predictable as that story arc is, and as predictable as like all that stuff is, when it happens, it's still a punch. Because the character of Otto Octavius is so well written, and he's acted so well, and the game is long enough that you kind of forget that he's going to turn into Doc Ock, and you get used to him as Dr. Otto Octavius, and you get used to him as this kind of like bumbling, well-meaning scientist. And when he turns, when he becomes this villain, you kind of feel it. You kind of feel it because you were introduced to him as this jovial, wonderful guy, and maybe in the back of your head you're like, oh, maybe he won't turn into Doc Ock. Maybe they're saving that for the sequel. Like maybe he's not going to turn into Doc Ock. You know, maybe like maybe that you know, and maybe he'll like at some point I was like they get their funding taken away from them, and I don't know if I'm just a fucking loser, but I was like, man, what are they gonna do? Like I was worried about them. It's like, oh, what's Otto gonna do? What's Peter gonna do? You know? But like, you know, anyone with half a brain like knows where that story's gonna go. But it was done really well, and uh, there's great care taken with this relationship between Otto and Peter, because it's such a it's basically the whole game. Well, not the whole game, but it's a huge part of the game. Is if the relationship between these two didn't work, the game wouldn't work. It's kind of like in Kingdom Hearts. If you didn't believe Kairi, Riku, and Sora were friends, the whole game just wouldn't fucking work, because the whole game hinges on these three people being like legit friends, and them losing each other is like losing something important. So I thought that was done really well, if a bit cliched. Uh, I have what I have next. Peter is well written, as are the supporting cast. The game doesn't waste your time. Almost everything that is revealed in mandatory cutscenes is very important to the plot and also to characterization. There's a lot with Aunt May. Aunt May is like a borderline saintly individual in this game, and she is in Spider-Man in general. Um, she lets Peter crash on her couch when she's homeless and insists he take money. Like she's Aunt May acts the way I think most people playing this game would associate with like their grandmother. Like I was never homeless and sleeping on my grandmother's couch, but when I was a kid, my grandmother would come visit us, and she would like slide me a 20, almost like she was buying drugs or something. She would like fold it up in her hand, and she'd be like, "It's nice to see you," and she would like take my hand, and she's like, "Now you don't tell your mom I got that for you," you know. So seeing Aunt May do that was like, oh, she's like a kindly old grandmother, you know. And I think everybody, with few exceptions, has a pretty positive view of their grandparents, if not their parents. So almost everyone identifies with Aunt May as this, you know, saintly, you know, matriarchal figure. And when people talk about Aunt May, they're like, oh, she's always working so hard for others, and she always believes that other people come first, you know. And that's all to build her up so that scene at the end has a lot of punch, because you really feel like you lost someone, and you feel like the world lost someone with this wonderful woman. And if you don't feel it, you're definitely going to feel it through Peter and his reaction to her passing. Uh, I liked MJ. I liked that MJ kind of had her own thing going on, and I liked that MJ wasn't just like an ancillary part of the plot. Like if you look at the plot, like what has to happen in order to get the story across, in order to get to the climax of the story, you could have just ignored MJ completely. Like MJ is not that important. Like MJ does not play an essential part in the story at all. You could take her out, and it probably not much would be missed. She kind of becomes Oracle towards like the end of the game. Like she would be calling me, especially in the DLC. Like she calls you and she's like, I did my research and I found this guy, and I'm like, am I playing the Arkham games? Am I talking to Oracle? Like what's going on? I mean, I know Barbara Gordon and MJ both have red hair, but they're not the same character. I like the tension between her and Peter. I think that's a staple of almost all Spider-Man stories, is that MJ and Peter have this on again, off again. You know, they're not perfect, but they're trying to work it out. Like this kind of like, you know, relationship that a lot of people go through, I guess. This imperfect thing that like you both love each other, but sometimes it's hard to make it work. You know, when your idealized concept of love collides with the real world, sometimes you have to make sacrifices and you have to make compromises. And I think that's a part of becoming an adult, is learning that, you know, you may love someone, but someone's still got to take out the trash every Thursday. You know? um, so I like that. I liked MJ. Miles, I didn't expect Miles to be in this game. I thought Miles Morales was like a completely separate universe or something like that. Like, so it was weird that there was like, is this guy gonna be like fucking Robin? Like, what's going on? What I thought was like Miles would be established in the first game, and in another game he would become Spider-Man. And before I had beat this game, they announced Miles Morales, and I'm like, okay, this is the game where he becomes Miles, where he becomes Spider. So the fact that he gets bit by a spider and he's already showing like some spider moves, and in DLC he's like, Peter, teach me how to spider. I'm like, okay, cool, why not? I mean, I like it. I'm guessing there'll be a team up between Spider-Man and Miles, like Spider Boy. I don't know. But anyway, uh, Mr. Negative was a bit underdeveloped. Okay, so I liked the intrigue associated with Mr. Negative. I like the fact that you have this person who's almost like a paragon of greatness, and he has like these, for lack of a better word, he has these demons inside him. You know, it's almost like he can't be a full person. You know, he's like the good side and like the evil side. You know, I think it's almost like a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, but it's a bit more extreme than that. Like every person alive, you know, has some good and bad qualities. Like there's no perfect person that ever lived. And I want to believe there's no completely evil person that ever lived. You know, there's a lot of grays, and the idea of Mr. Negative is like this all good person and this all evil person, like the two split sides of one man, was very interesting to me, and I kind of wish that was explored more, because what it boils down to is, oh, there was an accident. That accident also killed his parents, and he's pissed off at Norman Osborn for it. And it's like, okay, but how does that really tie into being like negative? You know what I mean? Like, how does that really tie into like this good and evil like dichotomy? Like, it's like he was a good person until he wasn't. You know, that old meme where like they just flip the negative and they make it seem evil. It's like he was a good, upstanding person until he wasn't, and it's like I can do revenge. Revenge is fine, but I really wish there was more there. This idea that like, you know, not only can this person pure evil, he can extend that evil to other people and like control them in a way. Like that's such an interesting idea. But toward the end of the game, he's kind of supplanted by Doc Ock, and it's really noticeable because he's freed and he's like running around doing things. But it's almost like because Doc Ock is finally on the scene, Mr. Negative's like, oh yeah, that guy. Well, we'll take him out, you know. And he's just like never mentioning it. It's almost like they just had to get rid of him, you know. And the subway boss fight wasn't enough, so they had to have another boss fight. It's a good boss fight though, but I kind of wish there was more. There was more there. I know there's a lot in the audio diaries, and there's a lot in his like journal entries. Um, but I kind of wish there was more there. Kind of wish there was a bit more about good and evil. What I have next is the highlight is Otto Octavius. I love Doc Ock. I absolutely adore him. I think I like him better than the version in Spider-Man 2. I forget who he's played by, I'm sorry. But aside from like Spider-Man 2 in this game, from what I understand, Doc Ock is a pretty shallow villain. From what I understand, most of Spider-Man's villains just want to rob banks and shit. Like there's not too they're no Batman villains, you know. Almost everybody's like, I want to do crimes, and I'm also like super strong. Who's gonna stop me? Spider Man, like, you know, whereas Batman, almost every one of Batman's rogues gallery is like people with significant psychological damage, I guess, to reflect, you know, Batman's own scarred psychological psyche. But I loved how Otto Octavius. I love how Doc Ock was like, "What I'm doing is right. What I'm doing is justified. What I'm doing is justice." Because there's no way that this man will ever have to answer for his crimes because he's just too powerful. He's too much a part of the system. No judge in the world is going to take him seriously. What I'm doing is what I have to do to get my revenge or get my justice. And up until the very end, he believes he's doing the right thing. And when he talks to Peter, he says, "You know, I had hoped I saw you like a son. I was hoping you would like join me." And Peter is just so broken by this because he looked up to this man and saw this man as like Peter's biggest asset is the fact that he's Spider-Man. Like that's the most good he does for anybody. And I think deep down Peter wants to be able to do that as Peter and not as Spider-Man. And what Doc Ock was doing, what Otto Octavius is doing, is probably the closest he ever came to helping, you know, everyone as Peter Parker and not just as Spider-Man. I don't think it's really stated outright, but it's definitely implied that that being Spider-Man takes a toll on him. And being Spider-Man takes away from his life as Peter Parker. And if he can do good as Peter Parker without having to be Spider-Man, I think he would. But with great power comes great responsibility. So there's a lot of layers to this story. It's done really well. And I'm usually not the biggest fan of Marvel movies. I think they're shallow, bombastic, and kind of boring. Fun fact: the most bored I ever was in a theater was watching Avengers Endgame. And I've never walked out of a theater before, but I came very close to walking out of Endgame. It was the scene where Black Widow and Hawkeye are like, "I want to sacrifice myself. No, I want to sacrifice myself." I'm like, what is this garbage? Like, did people? It blows my mind that it's like, what, the top grossing film of all time without adjusting for inflation. It's like, I don't know. I guess it's inoffensive enough that people can. It's not very controversial, but it's just that scene, man. I was like, man, that scene sucks. It's so ridiculous. It's like they take this moment where someone's going to sacrifice their life, you know, for a chance to change the past, and it's a very dramatic scene. But then they're like, "No, I'm going to sacrifice myself." They just destroy all the tension. They just destroy whatever gravity that scene had. And that was following an hour. I haven't seen all the Marvel movies, so everything else was like, I don't get it. I don't. I guess they're going back in time to the other Marvel movies. It's a glorified clip show. Anyway, enough crapping on the Marvel movies. I thought Homecoming was pretty good, but mostly because of Michael Keaton. I love almost everything Michael Keaton's in. I love Birdman. I think Birdman's an amazing film. Memory of Steve Ditko, who with the stroke of his pen made the world amazing. Honestly, I think that's it. I forgot how long these credits are. You're about to see a platinum pop and 100% pop. Oh, there it is. There it is. We're going to pay our respects, and we're going to get the platinum pop. I've already talked about it. I talked about it during the credits, because the credits are super long. I mean, we sat through them 4 or 5 times, because all the DLC had credits too, so it's like 2.5 hours of credits. Okay. This is it.
Hey, Uncle Ben. Miss you. Doing my best to make you proud.
Great power. Be greater. Uncle Ben, I'm doing my best. I'm doing my best to make you proud. Total trophy progress, 100%.